Hey, I wanted to detail a bit Kanye's journey into the political world. We saw over the last couple of days that not only did Kanye donate to Amara Enya's campaign to the tune of $73,000, but also showed up today at one of her pull up campaign rallies in support of her. And I think the journey he's gone on is pretty uh, fascinating and goes against the major narrative that has been put in place about him just being awful. I think that's a major narrative right now that Kanye's just dumb. So I wanted to go through this a bit and then specifically this article in the Chicago Tribune because this is a hometown paper discussing Kanye, and I think a respected hometown paper discussing Kanye and some of the political opponents of Enya talking about the relationship between Kanye and Enya. And Enya also describes some things in her talks with Kanye that I think are illuminating for us as Kanye fans who want to understand more of what he's been saying and doing. But first, the journey up to this point. You remember in, what was it, 2015, 2016, Kanye says, I'm running for president in 2020. Let's go. And we don't hear anything more about it for a while. And at the time, like, we didn't know anything about his policies. We didn't know anything about anything. Most people just laughed it off. You and I are like, fuck yeah, how can we sign up? Like, we're going to call, we're going to knock, we're going to be his campaign managers. And then he's kind of gone for a little while. And when he came back to the public eye back in April, he starts talking very, very broadly about the divide in America between the left and the right, between people that feel this way about this topic and this way about another, and that he wants to find middle ground. He wants to bridge the gap. He put on the hat to show people that you can inhabit both spaces, that you, as somebody that's more progressive, can find common ground with somebody that's more conservative and vice versa. So he does this gesture that's, just that, a gesture. But then he takes a step forward and starts talking a bit more about politics. And, the first time he met with Trump, it was just a photo opportunity. We were told that he talked a little bit about Chicago, but not much. It definitely wasn't publicized. So all that we really got from it was that Kanye took pictures with Trump and went on his way, which got Kanye accused of just putting himself out there for Trump's benefit and not getting anything in return. So Kanye finally starts talking about politics over the summer, and it's rough. It wasn't the most nuanced view. He was getting information from Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk, others on the right wing side of things, and people that have kind of intense right wing views, and then getting alternative perspectives from T.I., John Legend, GLC, and Consequence, I believe it is, and even talking to some politicians. We saw Kanye speak in one of those pop-up TMZ interviews where they're just like, hey, TMZ, tell us things. And he said, when asked about everything he's doing with politics, that the first time I tried making music, I was bad at it. The only reason I got good was because I learned and worked at it. I wasn't a good rapper. I was bad at that. But then I learned and got good at it and worked and worked. I wasn't good at fashion, but then I learned and got better at it and worked and worked. I'm at that beginning place with this. And I may not know everything right now, but I'm putting it out there that I don't. You're seeing me at the infancy of where I'll get. And if I get to the level that I got to with everything else, just you watch. But he's just doing it in a very, very public manner, where with the music, the rapping, we got to see him at the end of that journey. With fashion, we got to see him more at the beginning, his first fashion show, which I think has aged better than people realize. It just got trashed at the time. And now he has a company that's valued at over $1 billion in the fashion world. And his clothing has had an impact on fashion culture. So Kanye talked about that each time you see him come back and talk, he has more and more insight to what he's talking about. And in September, we saw him go to Detroit and meet with Dan Gilbert, who owns, I'm forgetting the company names, Quicken Loans, StockX, a few other specific businesses. Bedrock, I think, is one that's dedicated to change in Chicago. He's credited with a lot of the revitalization of Chicago and parts of Cleveland. And he employs 17,000 people in Detroit, which is insane. It's the largest in a city by a single company owner, a single company. So he's responsible for a lot of impact on Detroit. Then Kanye went down to Miami and went to Pitbull's charter schools and met with the head of the charter school and Tony Robbins and talked with them about what they're doing and how they're doing it. He went to schools in Chicago and in Detroit, and then also went to some youth organizations that blend sports and social movements and sports and education, and to talk with them about how they work with the community and their civic engagements. He's been doing research and coming back. We saw him in that second meeting with Trump. He went in and he talked about a variety of things, which included gun reform, policing reform, healthcare reform, education reform, ending stop and frisk. Like, Kanye brought policies to the forefront when he was talking with Trump. And nobody really wanted to focus on that. But that's where Kanye's talking about. And it turned out he had talked with somebody from the mayor's office in Chicago. He met with the head of police in Chicago. And that he also had met with Amara Enya even before donating to her campaign. So Kanye's gone from this journey of just being on the outside of things and be like, hey, we need to fix the divide, to actively stepping into that world, bit by bit, learning about it, correcting through trial and error his views on things and how he approaches things. And he's making some moves. So this check here was the $73,000 one. And, you know, but the $73,000 check. And it seemed like a weird number at the time. And it turned out that Amara had actually run for mayor in 2015. But she didn't get the necessary signatures to be on the ballot. But she had opened a bank account for her campaign and just never closed it. And because of that, she was still having to report for the campaign finance reporting. And because she didn't for several quarters, she racked up $73,540 in fines. And Kanye's check was specifically to pay those fines to get her in good standing for her mayoral campaign. And you can see that he showed up at this rally today. Chance, Amara, Kanye. I love this because you can see Amara starting to chant, like, who are we? This is our city. And Kanye starts chanting along with everybody else. So there he was. Now let's get into how this is being talked about in the media and how somebody like Bill Ruthart is framing the conversation around Kanye. So the article starts by just briefly talking about the events today and the check and setting it up in general, I guess, view of the topic. You know, Enya has been working with Kanye. She got his endorsements. And the agreement, emphasizing the entertainment star's agreement with her on key issues facing Chicago over his enthusiastic support for Republican President Donald Trump. And he talks about West support for Enya came on the heels of Chance's high-profile City Hall endorsement of the West Side community organizer and activist last week. And this is where it starts. Chance's advocacy for Chicago, including his two $1 million contributions to Chicago public schools and for the expansion of mental health access, made his support for Enya's campaign a simple embrace for the 35-year-old candidate. whose profile immediately was lifted by the star hip-hop artist's backing, really painting Chance as the angel to set up the conflict of Kanye. With West, things are a bit more complicated. The famed rapper, designer, and husband to reality TV star Kim Kardashian West, he wants to be called Ye these days, first bit of snark enters into the equation, enjoys worldwide recognition and 24 million Twitter followers, but West also has been a visible booster for Trump, a divisive politician reviled in many corners of deep blue Chicago, and has made controversial statements describing slavery as a choice. Remember, he said 400 years of slavery. That sounds like a choice to me. He didn't say that slavery was a choice, is a choice, any of that, but that 400 years of it, spanning 1600s to present day, going from the physical to the mental, describing that as a choice. Did he describe it well? No. But did he say that slavery is a choice? No. You would hope that a journalist like Bill would, care about the appropriate framing of that topic, but the false framing by the media, God, I feel like I'm on Fox News. How people have framed this has taken the actual words that were said and twisted them into something that wasn't said, which is kind of annoying that everybody then just keeps repeating the lie. But there's probably a valuable lesson in that. And pushing for abolishing the 13th Amendment, not quite accurate either, which outlawed slavery. You see how Bill frames this. It's not that Kanye pushed for abolishing the prison slave labor clause in the 13th Amendment. No, he just says that Kanye pushed for abolishing the 13th Amendment. So this is a subtle way of making Kanye look very bad without giving all of the context. And Bill covers himself a little bit by saying West later apologized and clarified some of the remarks, but they created a political stir nonetheless. Notice that Bill doesn't clarify in the way that Kanye did, but just says Kanye clarified, allowing the unclear statement to stand as the only thing that we think Kanye said. That's some bullshit. But it shows he's not getting any favoritism by the local papers. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune on Tuesday, Enya said West's support came after a telephone conversation she had with him last month. Last month is before the meeting with Trump. It's before the check he gave her. It's before we knew he was involved in any of the political space like this at all. A wide-ranging discussion in which she said it became clear that the entertainer embraced her advocacy for police reform, opposition to stop and frisk, push for more mental health clinics, and support for creating more economic investment in the city's most struggling neighborhoods. Where have I heard those topics before? Oh, that's right. Those are the topics Kanye took to Trump. Oh, does Bill mention that? No, Bill doesn't mention that. But it turns out that these progressive policies, the progressive candidate, Amara Enya, has stated, or her platform, that's the exact thing that Kanye heard and then took to the president of the United States and said, hey, we should do these things. To which Trump said, yeah, I'm open. And even just last week, it came out that Trump was saying that he now is more in favor of the kind of reform that Kanye told him about, and that if Jeff Sessions didn't like it, that Sessions could deal with it because it's Trump's decision. Which, I'm not a fan of Trump in any way. I pray for Mueller every day to be done with the investigation and for heads to roll. Not literally, but just for people to go to prison. With that said, I feel like Trump is more of a neutral, chaotic force than all evil. Like, I don't think he's a good guy by any means, and I think his views are pretty backwards, especially on racial topics, topics of gender, and all those issues that take nuance. But that the worst of Trump comes from people that are around him. And that when those people can point Trump in a direction and whisper in his ear, you get some of the worst things. But then when you have somebody like Kanye talking with him and saying things, that you get Trump being more reasonable, because Trump just wants people to like him and just wants positive press and attention because he has that ego. If siding with Kanye gets him praise and gets people praising him and loving him, he'll side with Kanye. If he has a bunch of people telling him to build that wall and that's the thing to do and this is why, he's gonna try to do that shit. So I think Kanye talking with him and talking with Trump and pitching these things can have real power. I just want to point out the guy Daryl Davis, who is credited with getting 200 Ku Klux Klan members to throw away their robes. Daryl Davis isn't anybody special. He's just a musician, a black man who started having conversations with KKK members and would just talk with them. And even though he knew that they hated him and that it was dangerous for him, that other people were upset that he was talking with them, he would have those conversations, he would befriend them, and they would realize that all the shit that they think separates us, like skin color, doesn't fucking matter. That all of that is just superficial. And that inside, everybody's just human, no matter what race you are, no matter what gender. That all that stuff just is pointless at the end of the day. So 200 people he converted and got them to see the humanity in others, where all they had before was hate. And he's called a hero. Kanye trying to do the same thing to this degree is just painted as a monster. Okay, so moving on from that, she said, celebrity endorsements are great, but in my view, they have to be tied to something of substance. In Chance's case, he donated $1 million to CPS, donated $1 million to help mental health expansion, and the specific conversation was warranted with Kanye to make sure there was an alignment on the policy, platform, and issues I've advocated for. Keep that line in mind. And the specific conversation was warranted to make sure there was alignment on the policy, platform, and issues I've advocated for. Because as we start to talk about Lori Lightfoot down here, So we definitely had a conversation, and when we talk about what Chicago needs and what it will take to get us there, he sees this campaign as a vital part of that. And that is what prompted him to support us and get over this financial barrier we've had. So Bill then goes on to talk about that financial barrier and then segues into Lori. While West's involvement will bring some stardom and financial help to Enya's campaign, it also is bringing newfound scrutiny. Fellow mayoral candidate and former federal prosecutor Lori Lightfoot said West's agent reached out to her campaign with a request for a meeting. So Kanye doing due diligence, trying to meet with people, get various perspectives, points of view, educate himself, see what he can do, how he could fit in. She promptly rejected it. This reflects what her true values are. This is Lori now talking, and she's talking about Enya. This reflects where her true values are. Kanye is a guy who has said slavery is a choice. No. Who has gone out of his way to embrace Donald Trump with a positive, love everybody, let's bridge the divide mentality. Who is racist, misogynistic, now she's talking about Trump, who is racist, misogynistic, and offensive, and not a guy who any progressive would ever want any association with. I mean, I think a progressive that could say, hey, I worked with Trump and made Trump give up wanting to build the wall and wanting to give up banning people from coming into the country, and who got rid of the tax plan and got him on board with single-payer healthcare. I think that progressive would be proud to have associated in a conversation with Trump. This facilitated that growth in his perspective on things. Unlikely that any of that would happen, but that's a situation in which this would not be true, where Lori just sees the one-dimensionality of that dynamic, and that continues on. Everything she says infuriates me. Lightfoot said, obviously she's desperate because she racked up all those fines at the State Board of Elections because she didn't completely handle her business. Ooh. But you can't credibly say you're a progressive when you take money from that guy. There's no way. I mean, that's not looking at any of the things that Kanye has been talking about as a futurist, as trying to. He wears a Kaepernick shirt. He says he wants to have Trump and Kaepernick mend things and show the country as a whole that we don't have to be on the divide and can mend things. He says he's a fan of Bernie Sanders' policies. He talks about wanting to do things that are progressive in policy, and yet she's saying that you can't take money from him and just reduces everything that he's said or done to this one specific thing, that he's had positive interactions with Trump. Enya said she had an out-of-the-blue phone conversation initiated by West last month. He was the one that reached out. And that the rapper followed up with text messages after the endorsement of Chance, the 25-year-old star rapper who was born Chancellor Bennett. That's a weird time to shove that information in there. Enya said West texted her while traveling in Uganda, and the campaign check arrived shortly after he returned to Chicago. I really like this part. It was, how can we take away any barriers to you getting on the ballot? We know that you have a platform. We know you have people, but that was a barrier that stuck out because it was just hanging there. Kanye saw that as, if we don't get this out of the way, then nothing else matters. So let's get this out of the way, and then we can figure out how we're going to do everything else with getting more resources, getting more visibility. So I think it was low-hanging fruit for him. I like that it's a little bit of insight into Kanye's perspective, and I don't think it's anything groundbreaking, right? But it just shows that Kanye is looking at things in terms of, okay, what's our goal to win the race? There's this hurdle here. Let's get that hurdle out of the way. Okay, we conquered that. Now, what's the next mission to do? Okay, we need more resources, and those resources are going to go to visibility. It just seems like a very step-by-step, mission-based way of trying to execute to reach a goal. I'm curious if he's like that with every venture that he has, and how this tracks with other instances of knowing how he approaches problem solving. One day we'll talk with him and find out. How, though, will Enya deal with the Trump dynamic? We approach it first by being very transparent and unequivocal on where I stand on issues, she replied, noting she rejects many of Trump's positions, including on immigration and policing. Enya also sought to thread a political needle by defending some of West's involvement with Trump, noting that the rapper has been careful not to address specific policies from Trump. Over and over again, he has not endorsed anything of Trump's political agenda and has said actively over and over again, I don't support everything Trump does. I like this, this, or this. I like Bernie Sanders. I would rather do this. But I like Trump's energy. I support him because he's the president. I support him because people told me not to. So he's talked about everything other than policy, but so many people just always reduce it back down to the agenda and political agenda rather than something more, which is very frustrating. We talked about the Trump factor, and he made it very clear that he doesn't necessarily support Trump's policies, some of the more controversial policies, but what he was interested in is for the ability for people to disagree and have dialogue about it. And that's one of the huge things that are missing. It's actually one of the shocking things to me. You know, I've always been very progressive in my views, more in that left-leaning Democrats. I was always really shocked growing up because I felt that the left tended to be more logical and thoughtful about points, and that the right tended to be more angry in general about things. Like, you'd hear people on Fox News just attacking for things that people on the left had done and reframing it without context and talking about it in the worst way possible. And I always felt kind of a sense of pride in the fact that, like, my side didn't do that, that we were fair in how we approached things. Seeing how that left progressive, logical, thoughtful group has approached everything with Kanye has been such a revelation. And it doesn't make me appreciate conservative politics anymore at all. but it shows me how hypocritical so many on the left are, and just how divided the conversation has become. And maybe that's in reaction to the right, that the left is now doing the same thing and using that outrage politics. And there is power in that. We've seen how much the vocal minority has been able to achieve by just being louder and angrier than everybody else. So if the majority starts getting loud and angry back, on a whole, that could be beneficial. But in situations like with Kanye, you lose so much of the nuance, and somebody like Kanye suffers because of it. Nobody is paying attention to the details of what he's saying. I've had friends that have been anti-Kanye now, and when they ask me why I continue to support him, I'll say, you know, he talked about this, this, and this. He hasn't supported policies. And their only response will be, ugh, like, he's a terrible person. Just like, how do you go from being upset about what he's saying to not seeing how hypocritical you're being with how you're approaching it, with how you're misrepresenting what he said and done, and then acting like it's not a big deal when people call you out for it? Frustrating. So I'm very on board with Kanye's mission of it being okay for people to disagree and have a dialogue about things, because I think nuance is being lost, and it's something that is so necessary to the conversation. Because if you just give into that outrage all the time, then you're never going to be able to focus on the details that matter. You're just going to be outraged by any little thing that sets off any problem, without having an open mind to say, oh, maybe I was wrong about this, this, and this. Maybe this is actually good. Maybe this isn't. You need to be able to have conversations. We have to be able to talk. But I do think there are lines. Like if somebody's like, I'm a Nazi, I want to have a Nazi like political group and advocate for our policies. No, no, that's a step too far, because those policies are antagonistic to a democracy. And they're for one group dominating everybody else. It's not for equality of people and what's best for people. It's what's best for one group of people. So get that shit out of here. But for the rest of it, I think we can find more common ground if it's not just poles of absurd behavior. Jesus. So now I have some very strong feelings about Trump and some specific policies coming out of the administration. He believes there always has to be room for dialogue, and people should be able to have a conversation and at least be aware of other points of view. That's fine. It really is fine. Thank you. Thank you, Enya. There's a difference between favoring an open dialogue. Fucking Bill. There's a difference between favoring an open dialogue and hugging the president in the Oval Office while wearing a Make America Great Again hat, which West did earlier this month in a Washington meeting with Trump. There's no mention of the policies that Kanye talked about, that Kanye actually brought a Make America Great hat and said that the again is insulting. You should wear just a Make America Great hat, and had Trump put it on. Nothing about that, or nothing about just the idea that if you have somebody that's ahead of you that has power and authority, that every day we're used to finding middle ground with that person. Even if we don't like them very much, disagree with things that they do, you don't outright go into conflict with your manager that you dislike. You find ways to maybe, I don't know, woo them, get on their good side. If you know that your boss likes baseball, maybe you watch a baseball game and talk with them about that. Maybe you read an article, look at the scores, and just talk with them and find that middle ground. Maybe you buy baseball tickets and ask to go to a game with them. And you maybe hate baseball, but you'll do that because you think that it's for the good of the relationship and the good of your career. Maybe then your boss will think better of you, keep an eye to you when it comes to opportunities. Kanye is just finding this middle ground with Trump and then saying, hey, can we do this, 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 and this? Are there problems with that? Sure. But is it all just one-dimensional as Bill makes it seem? No, not at all. Not at all. So the association could open Enya to criticism from many of the other 14 candidates in the race should her campaign's viability continue to improve. 14 is a lot. That includes Lightfoot, the former Chicago Police Board president who has aggressively courted progressive voters since entering the race in May, several months before Mayor Rahm Emanuel, blah, blah, blah. She spent all this time about a new progressive vision, Lightfoot on Enya again, bringing the government to the people and the other stuff this woman spouts that doesn't square with embracing and taking money from somebody who's giving a big wet kiss on a regular basis to the likes of Donald Trump and who has said offensive and harmful things about the black community and our experiences in this country. Again, a one-dimensional, simplistic view of everything that Kanye has said and done, to the point where it's problematic. It's not just a random person like me or you being like, I don't like this. This is somebody that's running for mayor being that polarizing and dismissive of somebody, which I think is a problem. On the other end of the spectrum from Trump, I feel like this is language that you would see Trump or a conservative figure that's as controversial as Trump use in describing somebody. I can't believe that anybody who wants to credibly lead this city would give him the time of day. Kanye was born in Chicago, has represented Chicago a lot, wants to continue to work in Chicago and build manufacturing in Chicago and help in Chicago. And she's saying, I can't believe anybody who wants to credibly lead this city would give him the time of day. He's still a constituent. He's still somebody that wants to help and support. And she's dismissing him and his humanity, anything he has to offer, based on the one thing that he's done with Trump. Wear the hat, hug him. Those interactions alone dismiss all of him as a person. That's insane to me. The irony is gigantic. Like, how can anybody that wants to credibly lead the city say that? It says a lot about her judgment, a lot about the true nature of her character. Again, the irony is just immense. Lori Lightfoot is infuriating. Enya is the director of the Austin Chamber on the West Side. She said the attacks will come because this is Chicago, but I believe in the truth. I believe in a track record. Enya's messaging effort continued Tuesday with the sidewalk rally. Kanye came up and Enya said of her campaign about 7 minutes into the rally before being interrupted by shouts of, "Oh my God," from a woman as West emerged from the crowd. You'll notice Bill does another sneaky thing here. Talks about Enya giving this speech and then saying that they eventually went into a conversation, Enya and Chance, where they answered questions from people on the street. And they engaged with about half a dozen of the onlookers, at time expressing frustration. The two spoke for 45 minutes. Now, this seems after the initial talk that Enya gave. And then he paints it as West didn't stick around for much of the conversation. After about 5 minutes of stoically leaning against a brick wall and listening to Enya and Chance, he slipped out of the rally and into a waiting SUV without addressing the crowd. So he paints Enya and Chance as being engaged and active in the Chicago community and really trying to interact with people, while showing Kanye as being aloof, not interacting, and just running away as soon as it seemed like his time was done. You can see him here chanting along, talking. He takes pictures at one point and starts to film. I think he was a little bit more involved than what Bill is promoting it as. I don't think he was as involved as Chance, but I also think that there's something missing to how he frames this. Kanye is such a huge figure. He could have just stepped up, taken the mic, and started talking, and people would have listened, and then the story would have been about him. He showed up and he stayed quiet, and he let those two have the spotlight and have the mic and lead the conversation and dialogue. Is there no praise for restraint? Is restraint not at times a virtue and positive thing? Like, would people prefer that Kanye step up and start stealing the show? They're just criticizing him for that and not giving those other people a voice or any agency in this situation. But because he gave them the opportunity and still showed up to show his support and be active, he's still painted as this negative figure. Frustrating. So media, still not there. Still a fucking skewed perspective. But we'll get there. A little bit at a time. I think we're seeing Kanye progress in how he's going about things, his understanding of things, him backing a progressive candidate like this. I think completely unravels so much of the conservative Republican Kanye that so many people have been painting him as, especially people in the media, the left media. How do they square this up with all the things that they've been saying about him? I kind of want to hear it, but then I kind of don't, because I feel like it's just going to be bullshit. Anyway, that does it for this video. Sorry, it's just me rambling for another 35 minutes, but I really appreciate it if you're enjoying the content, if you subscribe to the channel. We hit the 1,000 subscribers. We're in the consideration to be monetized, which is huge. Now it's just continuing to grow the channel, and would really appreciate that support. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Kanye Podcast. And you can also listen to our podcast on iTunes. Episodes go up on YouTube as well. We just released our episode on Cuddy Montage, which is really good. You will never listen to the song or Kids See Ghost in the same way again. You'll have a deeper appreciation for both. We also have shirts available on watchingthethrone.com, and you can just talk to us on Twitter @Kanye Podcast. So thank you very much, and if you have a request for another video, leave that down below and I will get around to it. Have a nice night.